This week in IT Sparkcast News Bytes, worlds collide. Nvidia puts the cloud giants on notice, and your CS degree might as well be a philosophy degree with a minor in interpretive dance.
Ouch.
Greetings and welcome to IT Sparkcast News Bytes. I'm your host, John Barker.
I'm your host, Lou Schmidt. Let's go see what's going on out there. It's been an interesting week, that's sure.
Definitely. It's Friday, June 27th. IT Sparkcast News Bytes is a digest of the IT news over the last week with insights, opinions, and a little sarcasm from two experts, each with over 20 years of experience working in IT or for IT vendors. And now for the News Bytes.
Boom. Okay. We all know about the apocalypse, cats and dogs living together, pigs flying, hell becoming exothermic, Bill Gates, and Linus Torvalds in the same picture, all signs of the apocalypse. Wait a minute. Okay. We have Bill Gates and Linus Torvalds in the same picture. Why is this news? This is a big deal because some of the biggest impacting people in IT space who are at loggerheads for so long are now on friendly terms. So what happened? A historic meeting with Linus Torvalds, the creator of Linux, Bill Gates, co-founder of Microsoft, was photographed together for the first time at a dinner hosted by Mark Russinovich, Microsoft Azure CTO, making a significant moment in our tech history. If you've been in this game for a while, this is the meeting you thought would never happen. The photo included Mark Russinovich, who is, as we've said, absolutely pivotal for early instrumentation of the Windows kernel for performance analysis, and ultimately the CTO of Azure. So definitely a top-notch guy. Also there was Dave Cutler, who's a legendary engineer behind Windows NT and other projects. He was also the guy behind OpenVMS, right? Which was a huge thing. So if you're watching this on a Windows computer or a Linux box, everybody who really mattered was at this meeting.
Yeah.
The contrasting philosophies were interesting because Gates being the closed source guy, Linus Torvalds really made open source sing. Yes, Stallman was out there, but he wasn't getting a lot of traction until Linus really came up with something very, very useful to push it up to the higher level. So it was shared via Russinovich's LinkedIn post, and it captured a friendly gathering. And I'd just like to say the impact of this one was pretty amazing, right? It definitely set everybody who's been involved in the whole operating system wars certainly were paying attention to this one.
So I don't know if this is quite the level of Reagan and Gorbachev coming together, but I would say, what this reminded me of, and it's amazing because just this week, and I'm guessing it's the YouTube algorithm seeing this and me seeing this picture online, but YouTube just recommended to me the video where Steve Jobs introduced the new partnership with Microsoft and put Bill Gates on screen back in 1997, I think it was, as he was trying to rebuild Apple as he had come back in. And there were lots of boos from the audience as Jobs was live and Gates was in from satellite feed. And the thing he was saying is like, look, we don't have time for this battle and to be competitors. We need to work more synergistically. If you want the Microsoft Office tools on your Mac, we have to work with Microsoft here. And if you think about it, at that time, Microsoft and Apple own 100% of the desktop systems out there. And
at that time, yes.
At that time, yes. So
yes, they did.
And that was, before really, desktop's a lot less important now because of mobile and things like that. But today, the reality is you mentioned this in the pre-show. Microsoft bought GitHub a while ago, and Git was Linus's baby, right?
He wrote it.
He wrote it. He got frustrated, and that's what Linus does, right? He gets frustrated with something, and he just writes something better, right? And that's in true geek hacker fashion. It's like, I don't like this. I'm going to build something better. And the fact that they're working together, and Microsoft today, and not that Bill is directly involved in the day-to-day operation of Microsoft, but Microsoft today is not the Microsoft of old. It is not the truly closed environment of old. And it is much more of a cloud services company than an OS company. Windows is not the key component of Microsoft's business. Matter of fact, like even the gaming portion of Microsoft is not focused on the Xbox hardware anymore. The new tagline for Xbox is, "This is an Xbox," and they point to a Windows device or a handheld made by somebody else or something that might not even run Windows. This is an Xbox. It could be a Microsoft or a Nintendo Switch. This is an Xbox in their mind. So they are not about the operating system so much anymore as their cloud services.
Speaking of things that are both open and closed, what's going on with the cloud right now?
Yeah, so there's an interesting article in Wall Street Journal where they're saying that Nvidia is ruffling the feathers of various cloud compute tech giants. And they're talking about Nvidia moving into cloud compute. And so for most people, they think of Nvidia as a chip manufacturer. That is the majority of their business. It does make sense that they would be moving into the cloud business. And this is, in my mind, a natural evolution for them as they're going to continue to grow. And if you look at what's happened with Amazon and Microsoft and Google, especially if you look at Microsoft in our previous conversation, the cloud has been a massive boost to their revenue streams. But what people don't realize is that Nvidia has actually been in the cloud business and have been a cloud provider for a while. So right now they do have a cloud offering that they call the DGX Cloud, which currently reaches about $10 billion in annual revenue. But that's just one of their cloud service offerings. So going back to, we just mentioned the Xbox and Xbox Cloud Services, NVIDIA also has something called GeForce Now, which is a cloud gaming service. So they've been doing that for 5 years. So they have been in this market for a while. That's something that they've been familiar with. So this is not a new thing, but it makes perfect sense for them as they're building the chips and they can build their own data centers and they can host it and they can really drive their architecture and they can be their own customer. It makes perfect sense to me. And, you know, whether you say eat your own dog food or drink your own champagne, I think that this is going to turn them into a powerhouse. And we've been talking about NVIDIA's stock price. This is going to drive their stock price like you wouldn't believe.
Oh,
I'm not a financial advisor, but I think I might be looking at buying some stock in NVIDIA real soon now.
And it's not just DGX Cloud from what I saw. They're also a major backer of CoreWeave. So if it's a startup that is rising quickly in the AI world, if you look at this from the perspective of an AI system, who's going to know better what's going on inside an NVIDIA chip than either NVIDIA or somebody who is very largely being invested in by NVIDIA? So this is definitely something that you need to keep an eye on. Not only one, for the potential to optimize very heavy vector workloads that need those NVIDIA chips, you might want to go directly to the source. But two, there's a potential for some legal turbulence here down the road. We'll see.
Yeah, so speaking of legal turbulence and lack of documentation, Lou, what's going on with WhatsApp?
Whoa, well, this comes to us from Axios, and they claim it's a scoop, which I have no reason to disbelieve. And that is WhatsApp is banned on House staffers' devices. Now, if you've been watching this show for any amount of time, you probably saw the analysis that we did when Signal was tripped to be the leaking portion of a certain conversation within the Trump administration And we called it through our testing early that the real issue wasn't the application, it was a person, and that turned out to be the case. What happened here is WhatsApp has been banned by the U.S. House Chief Administrative Officer because of very murky data transparency and data protection, right? So there's an absence of stored data encryption, potential security risks. So staffers are prohibited from downloading or using WhatsApp mobile, desktop, or web browser versions on house managed devices. It's always going to come down to who and how you're managing the device. It's difficult for me to control what you're doing on your personal devices. It sounds like you've got a point you want to get in there.
Yeah, so there's a couple of interesting things. I don't think that it was a lack of encryption. It was a lack of communication around what encryption was used.
Yeah, what is it? Yeah.
The other thing was that there were multiple apps that were banned. It wasn't just WhatsApp, but DeepSeek, various ByteDance apps, and Microsoft Copilot was also banned.
Though, because we don't know what it's doing.
Right. And that's the thing, is that documentation is key. And so I don't feel that this is a political move. And I actually feel really good about this move in that the government is taking the documented mechanism of security very seriously.
It's
and if you're not and if you're not documenting how your security works, you're not going to be used by the US government. And so I don't think that this was a partisan thing. I think that this was something that was done on a bipartisan basis. And it's something that I feel that is very, very important. So now this also goes back to a conversation we had last week in where it came to Telegram. I'm sorry, this was 2 weeks ago, where it was our CV of the week, where Telegram was used to send messages that were being faked to Mac users saying, hey, we're from IT, jump on this Zoom call. And then we said, we have a problem, download this malware, infect your systems. And boom. The question was, why were you using Telegram? And so the question to you is, how do you decide what messaging system? And really at this point, no real judgment, is what do you use? And I can 100% understand not wanting to use Teams. Every time I have to jump on a Teams video call, I cringe. Not as bad as I cringe if it's a Cisco call, because that's the last thing I want to do. But if it's Zoom or something else, I'm much more interested in doing that. But Teams is a little more janky than Zoom. But how do you make your decisions, and how does security play into that? And does a integration with your existing security and your user directory play into that? So we do want to hear from you on that.
And it was also really interesting. The CAO came out with the recommended applications that they say you should look at using. One of them we're quite ambivalent on, which would be Microsoft Teams. But Wicker, Signal, iMessage, and FaceTime are secure communications office. And that's really interesting because Teams, Wicker, Signal have all had very deep looks recently. And iMessage and FaceTime, we've talked about Apple resisting government oversight and blanket decryption of its services from government entities to preserve its users' privacy. And now we see them on this list. So they come along and they sort of pop that bubble of you can do anything you want. Right. Now, speaking of pop bubbles, there's an interesting bit of news we should discuss.
Yeah, so this will be a short one, but there was an interesting article from The Atlantic, and I want to take this with a grain of salt. And I made a big joke about this, about your CS degree. So I don't fully buy in on this, but what they're saying is that there was a major surge in CS degrees between 2005 and 2023, and that those numbers quadrupled in that time. And that makes a total amount of sense. But what they're saying is that it's mostly flattened since then. Now, that might just be because that was a big spike as the industry was growing and that there was a natural flattening. Or it might be that the rise of AI and the influence on coding and such has scared people off. It might be, there's been something else in the industry. It might be people moving into other areas, but they're pointing at AI and they're saying that AI is scaring people off and people are not moving into CS roles because they think that AI is going to take those jobs away from you. And I think that there might be something to that as far as it's scaring people off. What I want to say is that a computer science related job is not the be all end all coder job. So, and where AI is going is not what we keep saying. What we keep saying
is more about
is
architecture, right? It's
correct.
more about how you put this stuff together. And what we haven't seen yet, and we're not likely to see for a while, is an AI making a good discussion about what database to choose, what chunking size to do, how to deal with elephant flows. All these things you're going to get as a CS major.
Well, you know what? I'll push back on that one, Lou. I think it could make those decisions. What I don't think it'll do is decide, I need this application and it needs to look like the holistic architecture and build the entire thing. I think if it says, well, what type of, should I be using elephant flows or should I go big Indian or little Indian in this case? And I give you, and then maybe AI can help you make that decision. That I think it would actually be pretty good at. It can then look at all the different points that you may not be thinking. That I think it could be helpful with. But what we keep saying is that AI is not going to take your job, but somebody using AI will. So the other side of this is that AI is not the. I'm going to use. I'm a big superhero fan. AI in the next several years is not Ultron. It is Iron Man, right? It's a human that's been super powered because he's got a powerful suit, a mech suit that makes him that much better or her that much better, right? So that's where I think we're going with AI, is that we become so much more powerful. Even when we get to super intelligence, super artificial intelligence, and we're going to do a hot take on this next week. So definitely take on that, because I think that's going to be a really exciting discussion that'll come out Wednesday next week, where that's Wednesday next week is the 2nd, July 2nd.
Yes.
And we're going to go into a deep dive on this, but that's where we're going to really see some acceleration, where the research that we do and the science that we do and the computer research that we do and the computer development that we do will get accelerated, and we'll be able to do much more exciting things because we have effectively a research assistant that is maybe smarter than us in some ways, but not as creative as we are. And then we get to be creative computer scientists versus having to figure out how to write a code that does some mundane task. Anyway, that's enough for that.
I got to say one thing, the thing to really watch for to see what the impact is doing, what's it doing to the offshoring companies? They're going to be the first thing that really takes the big hit once this stuff really pushes into the higher area. They're already taking hits.
Yes, but I also think that those folks are super creative on how they use those bodies. And I think that they'll find the next thing that they can do. And I think that they get really good at that stuff. But that is going to wrap up this episode. And I do want to talk about a little piece of feedback we got. So Tim reached out to me on LinkedIn directly. He actually reached out to Spark on LinkedIn. And what he asked, I thought this was great, was like, is there a way to get email notifications of new episodes and thus get the show notes in a similar way that you would from a Patreon podcast? Now, we're not currently on Patreon or Substack, which is another type of tool like Patreon. It is something that we've been considering, but we were waiting until we got a little bit bigger with more of a following. But what I want to hear from you is do you think that we're ready to go to Patreon? Now, Patreon would be something we would have a subscription, $1 a month, $2 a month. We'd have different tiers. We would give you benefits, maybe get early access to things like our hot takes and things like that. Maybe we would give you a monthly dial-in where we would have a meeting where you guys could come in and ask us questions as a group. Maybe we would do, one of the things we've been talking about doing is a watch along. We would watch the IT crowd on Discord, and you could watch it with us, and we would chat back and forth and do that. Things like that, something fun. Is that something that you would be interested in? Send us a note. You can send email to to feedback@itsparkcast.com. You can reach out to us on X @ITSparkcast. You can reach out to us on LinkedIn. If you're on YouTube, leave a comment down below. We do read every bit of feedback we get, however it comes in, and we do respond to everything that we get. And if it's particularly insightful or interesting, we do read it out on our Friday news bites, and you'll hear it there, just like we did with Tim's. Make sure you hit like and subscribe so that you don't miss anything if you are listening on YouTube. With that, we're going to turn you back to your day from the world of enterprise IT. Take care.
Thanks for coming.